Laughter echoed through the five-star restaurant as a waiter shouted, "We don't have tables for people like you." Ethan Ward, a single father, was kneeling on the floor, wiping water from under his daughter Lily's feet, his shirt soaked through. A woman at the VIP table raised her eyebrow. Perhaps they took a wrong turn into the floor for rich people. The entire dining room erupted in laughter. Lily gripped her father's hand, whispering, "It's okay, Daddy. We can leave." Ethan bowed his head and turned to lead his daughter away. A deep female voice cut through the noise from the main table. "Stop! Who just said they don't belong here?" Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale Tech, stood up, her gaze sharp as a blade. "I'm the one who reserved this table. They're sitting with me." No one dared breathe. She wiped the water from Lily's hair and said softly, "This dinner is on me. As for kindness, you already paid for that." Ethan Ward was 37 years old, a former aerospace engineer who had lost his wife 5 years ago in a factory explosion. The blast had taken her life and shattered his career, leaving him alone with a 7-year-old daughter and a guilt that never quite faded. He had walked away from engineering, unable to face the technical drawings and safety protocols that had failed to save the woman he loved. Now he worked as a maintenance technician at Hale Tower, fixing broken equipment and keeping the building running smoothly. The pay was modest, the work was unglamorous, but it allowed him to be there for Lily, to pick her up from school every day, to tuck her in every night, to be the one constant in her world. Despite their financial struggles, Ethan made a point of taking Lily out to dinner once a month. "So you know Daddy is still trying to give you something normal," he'd tell her. "So you remember that we're still a family." Well, this particular evening, he had chosen Aurelio's, an upscale restaurant downtown. Years ago, when he was still an engineer, Ethan had designed the building's safety and climate control systems. He knew every duct, every emergency exit, every sprinkler head. It felt familiar, almost safe. What he hadn't anticipated was how unwelcome they would be. The hostess had looked at them with barely concealed disdain, her eyes sweeping over Ethan's clean but inexpensive shirt and Lily's secondhand dress. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, under Ward, 7 o'clock. She had checked her list, frowned, then gestured vaguely toward the waiting area. "Please wait here. We'll call you." 30 minutes passed. Other parties with later reservations were seated. Ethan watched them go by, keeping his expression neutral for Lily's sake. When he finally approached the hostess again, she had waved him off dismissively. "Sir, we're very busy tonight. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of our casual dining locations." The message was clear. You don't belong here. As they waited, Lily had accidentally knocked over a water glass. It shattered on the marble floor, drawing every eye in the restaurant. A waiter had rushed over, but instead of helping, he had shouted loud enough for everyone to hear, "We don't have tables for people like you." The humiliation was complete. Ethan knelt to clean up the mess with napkins, his face burning, while laughter and whispered comments filled the air around them. "It's okay, Daddy," Lily whispered, her small hand trembling in his. "We can leave." Those 5 words broke something inside him. His daughter, his beautiful, innocent daughter, was learning to accept rejection, learning to make herself small, learning that some spaces weren't meant for people like them. He was about to stand, about to take her hand and walk out with whatever dignity he could salvage, when a voice rang out clear and commanding. Victoria Hale had been sitting at the restaurant's best table, a corner booth with a view of the city skyline, reviewing contracts on her tablet while waiting for a business associate who was running late. She was CEO of Hale Tech, one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the region. At 32, she had built an empire through brilliance, determination, and a reputation for being ruthlessly efficient. She didn't typically involve herself in others' dramas. She had learned early in her career that caring too much about other people's problems was a liability. Stay focused, stay cold, stay on top. But when she looked up from her work and saw a small girl, no older than 7, trying to comfort her humiliated father while holding back tears, something shifted inside her. She saw the father's worn hands carefully picking up glass. She saw the daughter's trembling fingers. She saw the crowd's cruel amusement. And she remembered being that child once. Different circumstances, but the same feeling. The knowledge that you weren't wanted, that your presence was an inconvenience, that your worth was measured by things you couldn't control. Victoria stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. The restaurant fell silent. Who just said they don't belong here? Her voice was ice and fire. Because I'm the one who reserved this table, and they're sitting with me. She walked across the dining room, heels clicking on marble, every eye following her. She reached Lily first, kneeling down to the girl's level. Are you hurt? She asked gently, examining Lily's hands for cuts from the glass. No, ma'am, Lily whispered. Good. Victoria stood and looked directly at the waiter. Clean this up, now, and bring fresh water to my table, for 3. The waiter stammered an apology and scrambled to obey. Victoria offered her hand to Ethan. Please join me. Ethan hesitated, pride warring with gratitude. Thank you, but you don't have to. I'm not doing this for you, Victoria interrupted, though her tone wasn't unkind. I'm doing it for her. She led them to her table, pulled out a chair for Lily, and personally poured water into a crystal glass. Order whatever you'd like. Tonight is my treat. Throughout the meal, they barely spoke. Ethan was too overwhelmed, too aware of the stares from other diners. Lily ate quietly, occasionally glancing up at the elegant woman who had defended them. Victoria found herself watching them, noting the gentle way Ethan cut his daughter's food, the pride he took in using proper table manners, the way Lily mirrored his movements. When the check came, Ethan reached for it immediately. Please let me pay. You've done enough. The meal is covered, Victoria said firmly. Consider it an apology on behalf of this establishment's appalling lack of basic decency. Ethan carefully counted out bills for a tip, leaving 20% despite everything, and placed them on the table. Then he wrote a simple note on the damp receipt. Thank you, L. As they left, Victoria watched them go, feeling something she hadn't felt in years, a crack in the armor she'd built around herself. The next morning, Ethan arrived at Hale Tower at 6:30, the way he did every weekday. He carried his toolbox, his work tablet, and a thermos of cheap coffee. He had a full day ahead, 3 HVAC units to service, 2 security card readers to replace, and a comprehensive safety inspection of the emergency systems. He was checking the electrical panel on the 15th floor when he heard footsteps approaching. He turned and found himself face to face with Victoria Hale. They both froze. You work here? Victoria asked, though the answer was obvious from his uniform. Yes, ma'am, I'm just a maintenance technician. Something flickered across her face, too quick to read. Good. Maintenance people can teach the wealthy a few things about humility. Before he could respond, she walked away, her heels clicking down the corridor. But after that moment, things changed subtly. Victoria found herself noticing Ethan in ways she hadn't before. She saw him arrive early every morning and leave precisely at 5 o'clock to pick up his daughter. She saw the care he took with every repair, the way he treated the building like it mattered. Most people in her position wouldn't have noticed the maintenance staff at all. They were invisible, part of the machinery that kept the world running for those who considered themselves important. But Victoria had been raised by a single mother who had cleaned offices at night to keep food on the table. She knew what invisible felt like. 3 weeks after the restaurant incident, disaster struck on a Tuesday afternoon. The executive elevator malfunctioned between floors, trapping 6 people inside, including 2 members of the board of directors. The emergency call button wasn't responding. Panic was setting in. Victoria was in a meeting when security alerted her. She rushed to the elevator shaft where a crowd of employees had gathered, everyone talking at once, no one doing anything useful. Has anyone called the fire department? She demanded. They're 15 minutes out, someone replied. We don't have 15 minutes, came a calm voice from behind her. Ethan was already opening the maintenance panel, his hands steady and sure. The emergency brake engaged wrong. If we don't release the pressure, the cable tension could... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. What do you need? Victoria asked. Everyone to step back and let me work. She cleared the area immediately, standing guard while Ethan worked. She watched his hands move with precision, watched his face remain calm, even as sweat beaded on his forehead, watched him solve a problem that could have killed 6 people. 8 minutes later, The elevator doors opened, and the trapped passengers stumbled out, shaken but safe. The board members thanked Ethan perfunctorily, already on their phones complaining about the inconvenience. But Victoria stood there watching this man who had just prevented a tragedy and felt her heartbeat quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "Coffee?" she asked. "My office, now." In her corner office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist design, Victoria poured 2 cups from her private espresso machine, something she'd never done for anyone below executive level. "How did you stay so calm?" she asked. Ethan took the coffee, still slightly incredulous that he was standing in the CEO's office. "Because I've lost something I couldn't save. Everything else after that is small by comparison." The raw honesty of the statement hit Victoria like a physical blow. "Your wife?" He nodded. "Factory explosion 5 years ago. I was the safety engineer for the plant. I had flagged multiple violations, but the owners ignored them. Profits over people, they said. When the explosion happened, I got 7 people out, including my wife, but she had gone back in to help someone else. The second blast, he didn't finish. He didn't need to." Victoria set down her coffee, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "Why would you?" He met her eyes. "I'm just the maintenance guy." "No," she said quietly. "You're the man who saved 6 people today, and 7 people 5 years ago, and a little girl from dying of embarrassment 3 weeks ago." A small smile touched his lips. "Lily talks about you sometimes. The angel in the white shirt who saved our dinner." "I'd like to meet her properly," Victoria said, surprising herself. "Would that be all right?" And so Lily began visiting Hale Tower after school, waiting in the lobby for her father. Victoria found herself making excuses to pass through the lobby during those hours, stopping to chat with the little girl who drew pictures and asked questions about everything. Lily was bright, curious, and possessed a wisdom beyond her years. She talked about her mother without sadness, as if death was just another fact of life. She asked Victoria questions about running a company, about being a boss, about whether she ever got lonely at the top. One afternoon, Victoria found a drawing on her desk. It showed a woman with wings standing between a father and daughter. In child's handwriting at the bottom, "Thank you, angel in white shirt." Victoria stared at the drawing for a long time, then carefully placed it in her desk drawer where she could look at it when no one was watching. She began eating lunch in the building's cafeteria instead of having meals delivered to her office. She made a point of greeting the maintenance and custodial staff by name. She discovered that knowing the people who kept her world running made her world feel more real. And she discovered that she looked forward to 5 o'clock, when Ethan would emerge from whatever corner of the building he had been working in, find Lily in the lobby, and leave together, hand in hand. She discovered that she envied them. Not their poverty or their struggles, but their connection, the easy love between them, the family they had managed to preserve even after losing so much. One evening, as she watched them leave through the lobby's glass doors, Victoria realized with startling clarity that she was lonely, that her success had cost her something precious, that she had climbed so high she couldn't remember what solid ground felt like. She pulled out the drawing from her desk and traced the figures with her finger. Father, daughter, angel. Maybe, she thought, the angel was the one who needed saving. The gossip started small, the way these things always do. A comment here, a raised eyebrow there. "Have you noticed how much time the CEO spends with that maintenance guy? Seems like special treatment, doesn't it? And that child is always here. Is this a daycare now?" By the second week, the rumors had evolved into something uglier. Anonymous emails circulated among the executive team, suggesting that Victoria's unprofessional relationship with a subordinate was damaging the company's image. Marcus Webb, the senior vice president of operations and Victoria's primary rival for boardroom influence, called for a meeting. "We need to discuss the optics situation," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Our stock price is sensitive to perception. If shareholders believe you're making decisions based on personal feelings rather than business logic—" "I'm making decisions based on competence and character," Victoria interrupted coldly. "Qualities that seem to be in short supply in this room." "Come now, Victoria, you're smarter than this. The man is maintenance staff. Surely you can see how this looks. How what looks? Her voice dropped to a dangerous level. That I treat employees with respect, that I recognize talent regardless of job title, that I don't measure human worth by salary bracket. Marcus leaned back in his chair, playing his trump card. The board is concerned. They have asked me to recommend that you issue a statement clarifying the professional nature of your relationship with Mr. Ward. I'll issue a statement when hell freezes over. The meeting ended badly. That evening, Marcus went further. He contacted a business tabloid known for sensational stories and leaked photos of Victoria entering the lobby with Lily, the two of them laughing at something. The headline that ran the next morning was predictable and vicious. Hale Tech CEO's secret family, maintenance man and daughter move in on lonely executive. The article was carefully worded to avoid direct accusations while implying everything. It mentioned Ethan's past, the factory explosion, the investigation that had cleared him but left questions. It suggested that Victoria was being manipulated, that Ethan was using his daughter to gain access to wealth and power. When Ethan saw the article, his hands shook so badly he could barely hold his phone. Lily read over his shoulder, not understanding all the words but understanding the cruelty behind them. Dad, are they saying mean things about Miss Victoria because of us? He pulled her close. Yes, sweetheart. They are. Can we make them stop? I don't know. He called the main office and asked to speak with Victoria's assistant. I'm submitting my resignation, effective immediately. Please tell Mr. Hale, I'm sorry for any trouble I've caused. He had barely ended the call when his phone rang. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. Don't you dare, she said without preamble. I have to. This is destroying your reputation. My reputation can handle it. Can yours? I don't have a reputation to protect. But you do. The company does. I won't be the reason you lose everything you've built. There was a long pause. When Victoria spoke again, her voice was raw. What if I don't want to myself what I've found? Ethan closed his eyes. Victoria, don't quit. Please. If someone has to leave, it should be the people spreading poison, not the people trying to do right. But the decision was taken out of their hands. The board of directors called an emergency session, demanding that Victoria sign a public statement distancing herself from Ethan or face a vote of no confidence. She read the prepared statement they had drafted. It was full of corporate language about maintaining appropriate professional boundaries and ensuring company focus remains on stakeholder value. It was, in effect, throwing Ethan under the bus to save face. I won't sign this, she said flatly. Then we have no choice but to escalate this to a full board vote, Marcus said, barely hiding his satisfaction. And I think you'll find the posts are in your favor. Do what you need to do, to Victoria replied. But know this, if you force me to choose between integrity and a title, I'll choose integrity every time. She walked out of the boardroom, ignoring the shouted questions, and went directly to her office to dig deeper into the situation. What she found made her blood run cold. Marcus Webb had been the operations director at the factory where Ethan's wife had died. He had been the one who had overridden Ethan's safety recommendations, who had pushed for faster production despite warnings. When the explosion happened, Marcus had escaped liability by ensuring the investigation focused on engineering errors rather than management decisions. And now he was here, at Hale Tech, trying to destroy the one man who knew the truth. Victoria called the company's legal team and demanded every document related to the factory incident. Then she contacted a retired fire marshal who had worked the investigation and convinced him to go on record about the pressure he'd faced to shift blame. She spent 2 days gathering evidence, barely sleeping, fueled by rage and a determination to set things right. On Friday morning, she called a press conference. The business media showed up in force, expecting her resignation or a scandal. What they got instead was truth. Victoria stood at a podium in Hale Tower's main conference room, with Ethan sitting in the front row beside Lily, and began to speak. 5 years ago, there was an explosion at a manufacturing plant. 7 people survived because one man, an engineer named Ethan Ward, risked his life to pull them out. His wife died in that explosion, going back to save others. She paused, letting the words sink in. That man was blamed for the disaster by executives who wanted to cover up their own negligence. He was pushed out of his career, forced to start over, and carried that false guilt for years. She pulled up CCTV footage on the screen behind her, grainy but clear enough. It showed Ethan carrying an unconscious woman through smoke and flames, his clothes on fire, his face twisted with determination. The timestamp showed him going back into the building 3 more times. The woman he was carrying in the first clip was his wife. She would die an hour later in his arms. The man you've been calling an opportunist, a manipulator, someone trying to take advantage of a lonely CEO, Victoria's voice broke slightly, is one of the bravest people I've ever met. And if acknowledging that cost me my position, then it's a small price to pay. She looked directly at Marcus Webb, who had gone pale in the back of the room. As for the executives who created the conditions for that tragedy and then blamed innocent people to save themselves, your time is up. I have the full investigation file, and I've forwarded it to the appropriate authorities. Marcus fled the room. 2 board members followed him. The remaining board members held an immediate vote. By 6-3, they reaffirmed their support for Victoria as CEO. The social media response was instant and overwhelming. Within hours, #StandWithVictoria was trending. News outlets picked up the story of the hero who had been blamed for a disaster he'd tried to prevent. But for Ethan, sitting in that conference room with his daughter pressed against his side, the only thing that mattered was the look Victoria gave him when she stepped down from the podium. It was a look that said, "You're not alone anymore." And for the first time in 5 years, he believed it. In the weeks following the press conference, everything changed. The State Labor Board reopened the investigation into the factory explosion, and Marcus Webb was officially charged with criminal negligence and evidence tampering. 3 other former executives were named as co-conspirators. Ethan received a formal apology from the factory's parent company and a settlement that included 5 years of back pay and damages. More importantly, he received something he thought he'd lost forever, his professional reputation. But the money and the vindication weren't what healed him. It was what Victoria did next. She established the Stand Again Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting workers and families affected by workplace accidents. The foundation provided legal assistance, job training, counseling services, and financial support for those fighting to rebuild their lives. Ethan was offered the position of technical director, overseeing workplace safety audits and advocacy. He accepted, not for the salary, but for the chance to prevent others from experiencing what he had endured. Lily became the foundation's unofficial youth ambassador, visiting families and drawing pictures for children who had lost parents to workplace accidents. Her simple, heartfelt drawings carried messages of hope. You're not alone. Heroes don't always wear capes. Family is who stays. The foundation's headquarters opened 6 months after the press conference, occupying 3 floors of Hale Tower. On opening day, reporters asked Victoria why she had made such a substantial personal investment in the project. "Because I learned something from a man who had every reason to be bitter," she replied. "That the opposite of cruelty isn't just kindness, it's justice. And justice means ensuring that what happened to him never happens to anyone else." One evening, after a long day of meetings and site inspections, Ethan found Victoria standing alone in the foundation's conference room, staring at a wall of photographs. Each photo showed a worker who had died in preventable accidents, a memorial to the lives that could have been saved. "Do you ever wonder if it's enough?" Victoria asked without turning around. "All of this, the foundation, the programs, the advocacy, does it make up for the lives already lost?" Ethan stood beside her, studying the faces on the wall. One of them was his wife, Laura, smiling in her work uniform on her first day at the factory. "No," he said honestly, "nothing makes up for that, but it means their deaths weren't meaningless. It means something came from the pain." Victoria turned to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Do you resent me? For having the power to do this, for not using it sooner, for living in a world where people like you have to fight so hard just to be heard?" Ethan considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, I might have said yes, but that was before I understood something. You didn't have to fight for me. You didn't have to risk your career, your reputation, everything you built. You chose to, and that choice changed everything. It wasn't a hard choice, Victoria said softly. The hard part is wondering if I deserve to be part of what you're building, the life you have with Lily, the family you've created from loss. Are you asking if you're worthy? Ethan smiled gently. Victoria, you stood up when you didn't have to. You fought when it would have been easier to look away. If that's not worthy, I don't know what is. What if I told you I don't want to just be the CEO who funds the foundation? Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. What if I want to be part of your lives, really part of it? Before Ethan could answer, Lily burst into the room, holding a handmade card. Miss Victoria, I made this for you. The card was covered in glitter and stick figure drawings. Inside, in careful child's handwriting, was a question. Can you be my backup mom? Victoria's hand flew to her mouth, tears finally spilling over. Lily looked worried. Did I say something wrong? No, sweetheart, Victoria managed, kneeling down to pull the girl into a hug. You said something perfect. She looked up at Ethan over Lily's shoulder, silently asking the question she couldn't voice. He nodded, a smile breaking across his face. That night, the three of them had dinner together at a small Italian restaurant. Nothing fancy, no reservations required. They sat at a wobbly table, shared a pizza, and talked about everything and nothing. As Lily colored on her placemat, she looked up and said, "This feels like family." Victoria reached across the table, taking both Ethan's and Lily's hands. It does, doesn't it? And in that moment, in a restaurant where no one cared who they were or what they'd survived, they became something new. Not a CEO, a technician, and a child. Just three people who had found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something beautiful. 1 year after the Stand Again Foundation opened its doors, the ribbon-cutting ceremony for its first regional support center drew a crowd of hundreds. Survivors, advocates, journalists, and politicians all gathered to celebrate what had become a model for corporate social responsibility. Ethan spent the morning checking the building systems one final time, old habits dying hard. He wanted everything to be perfect, not for the cameras, but for the families who would walk through these doors seeking help. Lily ran through the halls with other children, her laughter echoing off the walls. She had grown taller in the past year, more confident, more secure in the knowledge that her world wasn't going to fall apart again. Victoria was backstage preparing her speech when the microphone system suddenly failed. The audio technician panicked, frantically trying to troubleshoot the problem as the scheduled start time approached. Ethan appeared at her side, toolbox in hand. Let me look. It took him 3 minutes to locate the loose connection and restore the system. As he stood up, brushing dust off his suit, Victoria smiled. You always show up at the right time. That's because I learned what happens when you show up too late. She touched his arm gently. You've never been too late for us. The ceremony began with speeches and acknowledgments. But the moment that mattered most came when Victoria invited Ethan and Lily to join her at the podium. This foundation exists because a single father taught me that dignity isn't given by position or wealth, Victoria told the crowd. It's inherent in every person who gets up each day and tries to do right by the people they love. Ethan Ward showed me that kindness isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing any of us can offer. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed and the sun began to set, Victoria found Ethan and Lily sitting on a bench in the center's courtyard garden. Lily was drawing in her sketchbook, her tongue poking out in concentration. What are you working on? Victoria asked, sitting down beside them. Lily held up her drawing. It showed 3 circles overlapping to create a space in the center where all 3 connected. Above it, in her improving handwriting, she had written, Us, always. Victoria felt her throat tighten. Can I keep this one? Only if you promise to put it somewhere you'll see it every day, Lily replied seriously. So you remember we're a team. I promise. Victoria carefully took the drawing, handling it like the treasure it was. Ethan put his arm around Victoria's shoulders, a gesture that had become natural over the months. Thank you, he said quietly, for everything, for seeing us when no one else did, for fighting for us, for becoming family. You don't have to thank me for choosing where I belong, Victoria replied, leaning into him. Do you really believe that? He asked. That this is where you belong? With us, with all our complications in our past, in our ordinary life? Victoria looked at Lily, who was already starting a new drawing. She looked at Ethan, whose face showed every year he'd survived, but whose eyes held hope instead of grief. She looked at the building behind them, filled with purpose and possibility. I spent years believing that belonging meant climbing higher, she said. That success meant standing alone at the top. But you taught me something different. Belonging means standing together. Success means building something that lifts others up. She took both their hands in hers. So yes, this is exactly where I belong. As evening fell over the courtyard, the three of them sat together on that bench, watching the sky turn purple and gold. Inside the building, lights flickered on, illuminating the words carved above the entrance. Stand again, because everyone deserves a second chance. Lily tucked herself between Ethan and Victoria, one small hand in each of theirs, and sighed contentedly. We're like a puzzle, she announced. All the pieces fit together. That's exactly what we are, Victoria agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of Lily's head. And in that moment, with the weight of the past finally lifting and the future spreading out before them full of possibility, all three of them understood that they had found something rare and precious. Not a fairy tale ending, not a dramatic rescue or a sudden transformation. Just a family, built piece by piece from broken parts, held together by choice rather than obligation. A family that had learned that sometimes the people who save you are the ones you least expect. And sometimes, in saving them back, you save yourself. The drawing Lily had made, 3 circles becoming one, said it all. Separate, they were individuals with histories and hurts. Together, they were something stronger. They were home. If you believe that one act of kindness can change an entire life, leave a comment and subscribe to Strong Dad Stories. We tell the stories that should never be forgotten.